And somewhere along the line, I realized that like a true brand that embodies so much more than, you know, a two-dimensional social media feed needs to bring substance in a way that you cannot achieve on that metric. You would sort of just say, I would like basically come to you with an idea and you would say, yep, do it. And I'm like, sweet, no support, no worries, just go work this one out.
Or full support if you look at it the other way.
It depends. Glass half full, glass half empty.
The notion of apologising if you didn't have the wrong intent. It's like, well, what are you apologising for? Because are you apologising for how you made them feel when you didn't intend to make them feel that bad?
Mm.
So then are you really sorry about something you didn't do?
I have an issue or have previously had an issue with being misunderstood. So immediately for me, if someone doesn't like me, I'm like, okay, well, what did they misunderstand?
What did they do wrong?
Yeah, essentially. And that is like blaming, you know, immediately, like not taking accountability for myself.
I think Vipassana, the practice itself, is very masculine, but the byproduct, once you get out of the hall, I'm talking about at Vipassana, you're like completely present and you're completely feminine.
I don't believe people are scared because I'm not. But I believe, like, now that you mention it, I'm like, when I talk to friends and stuff, and obviously they know I meditate, and it's like, why don't you? Like, again, like, sorry, like, just circling back, why are we avoiding meditation? Like, you know it's powerful.
I think the meditation and the self-awareness and the business journey is all intertwined because, like, I agree with you, the journey of entrepreneurship is very self-reflective and growth. This is always you're either growing or you're dying.
I really want you to be vulnerable, but it's like, well, you've not created a safe container for me to feel vulnerable, because vulnerability can't be forced. It's not true vulnerability.
All right, welcome back to the Stillness Everyday podcast. I've got Sophie Wilson from On Track Studios. We're recording live at On Track Studio.
It's not live, but we are recording here.
Okay, so it's not live, but it will be live if anyone is tuning in right now, which is most definitely not happening.
It could be live next time. We, supply and demand, just demand and we'll make it happen.
Correct. So we're going to talk all things from meditation, running business, relationship with self, maybe relationships with others. I really want to start with the business side because Sophie used to work for me, was it 2 years ago? Maybe?
What is time as a concept, really?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think almost 3 years ago, probably.
Oh, wow.
Well, it depends which version of working with you it was, but yeah.
True. And then you decided to just one day buy a Rodecaster Pro and that was it. You left the next day.
Yes. Yep, that's what happened. Let's unpack that.
So let's talk about it because I remember it arriving to the office and I was...
That's funny because it's true. So...
How did you start? You just dove headfirst into it.
Okay.
You didn't have, I guess you were working in business, but you didn't necessarily have a business background. So
no, yeah, so true. So context was I was working with Mammoth in the Pottery Studio. I was on my own journey of what is marketing, what's powerful content, all of these things that we would bond over. And somewhere along the line, I realized that like a true brand that embodies so much more than, a two-dimensional social media feed needs to bring substance in a way that you cannot achieve on that metric. And so that's when I started thinking, okay, a podcast is the powerful piece of content. And I was like, Rod, we need to do this for both brands. Like the primary focus was the Pottery Studio because you would usually only talk to me about the Pottery Studio and like delegate tasks about Mammoth. And it was always the back of your mind kind of thing. But so I kind of dangled the bait in front of you by being like, this is what I think would transform the brand. I think we were both on the same page about what good content is. So I pretty much just sold the idea to you of, I think we should start a podcast for the Pottery Studio. And you were like, yep, go do it. And that's sort of how you work. You would sort of just say, I would like basically come to you with an idea and you would say, yep, do it. And I'm like, sweet, no support, no worries, just go work this one out.
Or full support if you look at it the other way.
It depends. Glass half full, glass half empty. And at the time, I guess that was pretty much, it's not the direct question you asked, but that is pretty much where I learnt how to see the glass half full because they're really, on one side, working with you had no support. But like, thank you, because you just got to work it the fuck out. And yeah, so basically you were like, yeah, go do it. So I was looking at online, like what options were in terms of starting a podcast, and like there was nothing. And that to me was like hole in the market. Let's provide this. This is so obvious to me as a marketer that this is necessary for brands to stand out online, that I'm like honestly shook that there's no available like way to do this for people who get it. So that's why I ordered a Rodecaster Pro and all the mics and just like got it delivered to the office. You're like, you said it. The funny thing is though, is that I obviously bought it out of my own money. It was in the hopes to bring success to your business. So what? But I obviously saw a lot of potential in the industry, and at the same time as I was working out, like trying to like innovate for the brands I was working with, which were Mammoth and Pottery, I was also getting into investing. So I was also looking on the stock market, working out what's worth investing in. I realized that I felt as though podcasting as an industry was an industry that was going to boom. And I'm like, sweet, how do I get in? Like Spotify's already kind of hit the top at the time. That's what I thought. This was pre-COVID, obviously, and all the things. But I was like, I don't think I'm in early enough for Spotify. So I was just like, the next best thing is like actually investing in podcasting as an industry by bringing it as a business, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So what was your first step as a startup?
Not telling anyone what I was up to because I couldn't deal with projections. No, the first step was work out how do I start a business? Or actually, I'm not sure if that was the first step, but
what did you do? Like, what was the first thing you actually did apart from buy the Rodecaster?
I bought the Rodecaster, then I came up with the plan to start a podcast, like for the brand. So I had my marketing manager hat on, and I was like, okay, what's good content? What represents the brand? And came up with a concept that really fit at the time. It was mental health. We were doing some Movember mental health thing.
Yep.
And yeah, so basically I came up with a concept of what made sense to you, which was like the owner of the business, which is, in my opinion, the most important thing when you're creating content for a brand, that is that the owner actually has to really connect with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. If you want it to be substance-based content, which is the content that converts, the content that brings that audience. So the next step was, working out what that looked like. And then came, working out how to bloody get the hosts like you and Jai, working out who's the best one, getting all the guests, trying to negotiate people's time, all of that kind of thing. And then it was editing it. And then it was,
Where did you record from?
The Rodecaster Pro was the business at first was a portable podcast studio, as I like to call it back in the day, which really meant Rodecaster in a washing basket, me coming to wherever was required. Yep. So at that time it was the Pottery Studio, which is the worst place to record a podcast. It's the loudest situation.
Yeah, from the neighbours. Yeah, obviously the Pottery Studio is like calm and stuff when you're there for a class, but during the day there's a few noisy neighbours. And so I just brought it there. Then from there, actually, I got a client because one of the guests was Josh Sherwell, who wanted to start a podcast. He was like, Soph, let's do this. This is, he had his dream with Ailish and Mitch. And then, I basically was like, hired out the gear pretty much and dropped it to him every time he wanted to record. And then from there, I secured a spot where people could come to record from, because I felt that literally my business evolved from like, okay, this is what I'm offering. Okay, what's the next thing that person needs? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? So for me, I'm like, the equipment is one thing you need when you start a podcast. The next best thing is like somewhere where you can go to have guests, because sometimes people are recording in their house, right? And it's a bit awkward to have guests that you've never met before come to your house. So I want a neutral zone where people can come and really bring content. And like the content is always at the forefront of my mind when I'm considering now and then I'm doing in terms of the business. It's like, okay, well, what element of this would make the most impactful or best case scenario content? And at that time, the natural next step was to have that neutral zone where people could come. And then from there, it was like buying like cameras and like leaning into the video element of podcasting and like leveling that up. And then, that was the first studio was just somewhere I hired. It was a boardroom, just quietly. It was the back of an office, and every
Wednesday they would have team meetings in there, so I would have to clear my stuff out. So I would like make it look like it was a legitimate studio for when clients came in. And then as soon as they left, I would clean it up like it looked like a basic boardroom. So, yeah.
So what was it like when was there fear involved with any of these steps?
100% the entire time. So mind you, this entire time, nobody understood like podcasting, what I was doing, why I bought all that gear. At the time, it was a huge investment, whatever it was, let's say $3,000 for everything. They were like, okay, why isn't Rod paying for this? Like, they didn't get that it was my dream kind of thing. And I just didn't really care as much. I say that I did care, but I didn't let it affect my, movements kind of thing. So I was very...
The people's opinion or the fact that I didn't buy it?
I didn't care that you didn't buy it. This is just me hashing that out right now. I just really feel like...
Thanks for bringing it up 3 years later.
No, I cared that people didn't get why I was doing it.
Right, yeah.
And I knew what parts meant something to someone. So say my dad being like, why'd you do that? I would be like, well, Dad, I'll get, 6 more recordings and the gear's paid for, so you've got nothing to worry about. Kind of on the defense, being like, okay, I understand that you don't get it. Here's what you're concerned about. Here's my solution for you. Probably just don't at me for another year, and then,
I can relate to a few of those things. There's 3 questions I want to ask, but the way you started On Track is very similar to how the pottery studio kind of evolved, and there was points along the way where people were like, what are you doing? Like pottery. And it was kind of, I guess there was, obviously I had my reasons to continue that while I was doing everything else, but there was always people like, what, it's not going to work, or blah, 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 like in your ear.
Yeah.
But you can see what's happening.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes, though, I don't know if you can relate, but sometimes did you not see what was happening? Like, you just had faith that you were kind of on the right path?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was like we had that one studio, and then all of a sudden we have 3 kilns and 4 studios, like, joined into one. And it's just like, it just keeps happening, and I'm listening to you go, oh, well, I bought it, and then I got my client, and then I got a boardroom. And I would like carry my basket around. It's like you wouldn't look. I think a lot of people, and this is where I have actually come unstuck recently, is I've gone, okay, I've built, whatever the business value is. I can now start at that point with a new business where you inject heaps of money into it.
Yeah.
But the business was completely different. And I was like, wait, I've never done e-commerce before.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm actually starting from the bottom. So I should have just gone, no, I'm going to start with $1,000. Rather than start with $100,000 and then empty it. Do you know what I mean? Because the learning along the way is what, like when you're learning and you spend $5,000, it costs you $5,000 because that's all you've spent. It's not as impactful. But when you spend $100 and you're like, fuck, and you start watching it go backwards. Yeah. You've entered at a different level, I think. So like,
exactly.
It's not like tomorrow I could start another pottery studio with $200,000.
Yeah.
And be fine. But I couldn't go and start, I don't know, a podcast studio. Yeah. Like you've done this whole fit out now, I would not come and invest that money because I don't know what you do.
Yeah. For those listening, the podcast studio is now not in the boardroom. But yeah, no, I completely relate to that.
But you look around, I look in here and I'm like, you spent $3,000 just painting this room, and that was like your initial scary investment.
Exactly.
So it's like it becomes comparable to where you're at, and you can't just jump the queue.
No, you can't.
Unless you've done it before.
Yeah. And I really relate to that in the sense of marketing, because I've got all this exposure to all these different businesses, all these different niches, and I feel like I know more than I actually do in the sense of like, if someone was to say, come and sell like pottery classes, I'd have a pretty good idea, like right when I left working with you, what works, what doesn't. And whereas like when I started marketing my own business, I'm like, oh, wait, what the fuck? I don't actually know. And no one really does until you do it.
I agree.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to touch on, you said the glass was half full because I wasn't supportive. And on the other hand, I was supportive in just letting you do it.
Yeah.
I obviously learnt behaviour from learning from my father.
Yeah.
But how do you think that actually helped you getting to here? Because I look back and I was like, it pissed me off so much when Dad, back in the day, Dad would be like, oh, just figure it out sort of thing.
Yeah.
He didn't even say that. He just here and trusted me to figure it out. It's like when I started building, I had no experience, and he fully just trusted me to figure it out. And I think when you have the mindset to figure it out, it just develops. It gives you this tenacity to actually keep going, but also the self-belief, but all of the things that you need to actually thrive.
Yeah. It's interesting because what I felt I needed from you was you being like, yeah, let's do it, and essentially doing it with me kind of thing. But what it taught me was, well, look, like I've created an actual functioning business from it. If we were to have done that together, then it wouldn't have been mine for starters.
I think that's where I'm kind of getting. It's like the difference between an employee or an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
Because if I did hold your hand the whole way, then maybe you wouldn't have gone out.
Yeah, it would have been a whole different realm. It's so interesting. Like, so what was the question? So basically,
how do you think that, me essentially throwing you in the deep end with everything, just saying, yeah, that's good, do it.
Yeah.
Actually assisted as a now entrepreneur.
Yeah. Okay. So what it taught me was just do it. Like, it basically was like, well, you are going to learn by executing. And I think it was the ultimate initiation into business, and it wasn't the first time you did that, right? Like at this time it was just a natural, all right, I'm buying the gear, I'm doing it. Like, that because of the way we work together was, okay, you brought me on as like this marketing kind of brand advisor kind of situation, my evolving role, whatever it was. And you on your side of the table were like, yeah, Sophie's earned my trust. I actually trust what she thinks, and I'm backing her by saying, yeah, I believe in you. You never said this, but essentially what you were saying is, I believe in you, do it, let's go. What I was hearing was, I'm testing you. So I'm like, all right, test me, which is funny, isn't it? Because I think that like that element of needing to prove myself to you and to myself was the very thing that allowed me to create what I've now got. Like that element of like, okay, I'm proving. Now I've learned that that's not the best way to go about things. Like, I don't need to come from that energy. But I think, we all have these like reasons why we do things, and they're powerful. Like, they're powerful things, like that kind of like whatever learnt behavior I picked up of like needing to prove from childhood and whatever, you brought that out in me, and like it was able to be like manifested through the power of my own discipline, but also through what I now see as support from you. I was able to actually create something that was my own through helping your business.
There's a concept that I've been like really thinking about lately, because I, do so many things, and it's not that I just don't approach them as if they're hard, but I feel like a lot of people when you're starting your podcast would have been like, well, that's really scary. And where would you even begin? And I know Ajuma always gets this like, oh, how would you price this? Like, like electricians who would just normally do, a few lights or fans or whatever, come up to a warehouse and seeing this big project worth like a few $100,000. Like, how would you price this? And it's literally just like a big construction project is like multiple little construction projects in one. So you just go like step by step.
100%.
And that's literally everything. And I was thinking about this with what the corrective culture guys do, because everything Jake and Callan have given me to actually, the posture stuff or whatever, it's so fucking simple. It's like what they teach is so simple, but it's actually just doing it every day.
Yeah.
It's the being disciplined to, lean against the wall and whatever exercise it is, or roll on foam rollers or balls. But it's like the discipline to actually just do that for 20 minutes a day is the hard part.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, tying it back to what the discipline did for me, it's like where that discipline was coming from wasn't from abundance of like, this is what I'm going to achieve. It was actually coming from lack and proving, and like, I don't want you to be right about me not being able to, like my perceived story of like me not being able to succeed and this not to be able to go well or whatever. It's like, it's funny, once you nail the discipline part, I believe the next challenge is, okay, now the intention of that discipline is where the work should go to.
100%, because I've definitely in the past, and sometimes I set random things now in my head just to convince myself to do it. Like, I don't know, whether it's ex-girlfriends maybe is a good example. Like, I'm going to do this now to prove that I can do it. But it's like coming from that, it's like, I know exactly what you're saying. It's like, I'm going to do this to prove.
Exactly. It's literally,
it's not really sustainable.
No, it's not. And it's been described to me before as donkey with a carrot or a stick. So it's like, is the reason the donkey is moving forward because he can see a carrot that he wants and he's taking steps towards that carrot? Or is it because he's scared he's going to get hit by the stick that's coming behind him? Like, you want to be looking at the carrot, not the stick.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
And then the carrot should ultimately not be, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it should fulfill you, not fulfill the desires of other people's.
Exactly.
Which I guess is proving at the same time, like,
yeah,
I don't know, whether you're dad and you wanted to prove that you can make it work. It's like,
yeah, totally.
So it has to light you up inside, which then comes back to why you're doing it in the first place.
Exactly. And interesting point on like the price thing that you brought up. It's like, I remember when I first started, obviously I was charging a lot less than what I'm charging now. But one thing I would say to any like up and coming entrepreneurs or anyone who's like wanting to start a side hustle or whatever is like, figure out what you want your outcome to be. And for me at the time, what I wanted was for podcasting to be accessible to the people who had substance to what they want to say. They like, my biggest why has always been make a positive impact on the world. So while the studio, and that's still true to this day, it's not about what I've got to say, it's about giving people the space to provide their version of impact or positive impact on the world, right? So when I first started, I'm like, really the only thing that matters to me is that people's podcast gets listened to. They have the means to create it and it's there for them. So my pricing literally was ridiculous, like ridiculously cheap, because I'm like, I want Josh Sherwell's message to get out there. Like, you know, he was like, he had so much to say, so much to give. I'd listened to him before. I'm like, I want that to be accessible to everyone. So yeah, I'm going to charge you whatever it was, $25 an hour for me to edit your podcast and like $25 to hire the gear. And that's that. Whereas like now it's about my knowledge teamed with that component. It's like for people to listen, there needs to be a level of quality of content being created from the podcast to pull that person in to listen to your podcast. So it's become priority for me to have, the prices are higher to reflect the level of, you know, lighting, cameras, gear, all the things that are way better now. But the why is still the same. And my outcome, I think it's like you need to think about what you want the outcome to be. And it's like the result. So for Jimmy fixing lights, it's like you want them to get lights, but also do you want them to use you again? Do you want them to refer them? Like what kind of clients do you want out of this? Like where is that at? And like what do you want most right now, and price it accordingly.
I can 100% relate. And I think people listening shouldn't, I mean, someone might argue, but I think that what you did was actually a good way to start, because it's like, well, my needs right now are actually, I don't have a job, so $25 an hour is better than zero, and I do want clients. But then as that evolves, you start increasing the value you're providing, and then, of course, start charging accordingly.
Exactly.
Because like when the pottery studio started, it didn't start when I took it over from Amy. I literally just wanted my rent paid and all the wages and everything.
Exactly.
So it's like, that was all I needed. So it was, people were like, how's it so cheap? It's like, because I have a job.
Yeah. I did too, right?
I just want my shed paid for.
Yeah, I had a full-time job until August last year.
Oh, right, yeah.
You know what I mean? So none of this, it's still not about making money, but at the time it was like, you know, at the very early on, I'm like, all I need is to like save, like get to $3,000 and I've made my money back. No problems. Then as I get, you know, more and more, I'm like, okay, well, this is what's important. And then, it's so interesting.
And it is like now we are changing prices according to like, you know, if you're actually coming to learn, it is going to cost a lot more. If you're just coming for entertainment, it's cheap because it doesn't really matter. Anyone can teach it. But if you want to actually really learn, I need to pay teachers more. I need better resources. I need better fire, I need better glazes, like all these different things, and need more space. So like the price, in order to be able to provide a better learning experience for someone wanting to learn pottery, you need to pay more. Yeah. And then the more they pay, then the more I can give.
And look, like, let's use pottery as the example. It's like what Alex Hormozy says is that you're paying for people's mistakes to have been made. So if you're charging more for classes, you're getting big dog potters coming in for workshops. Say Peter Wallace, he's coming in to teach you how to make a teapot. That costs more because he's made like 1 million of them. But alternatively, you could do a $20 class, have me come in and teach how to make a teapot, and that's what you get, whatever version of teapot I create, right? Like the thing that you're getting and paying for is better because you've bypassed all of the mistakes that he's previously made. Yeah. And that's just the same as podcasting for me and whatever your business is.
It's you're paying. It's such a good quote from Alex. I think he said the reason he buys courses and like mentors, like your podcast mentorship, is because we are buying Sophie's 3 years of knowledge.
Exactly.
And getting it in 4 weeks.
Exactly. So it's like and I believe I used to not have services like my mentorship because I believed that why would I charge that when I've learned it from learning it from just doing, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, wait, some people don't want to spend 3 years. Fucking oath, I didn't either. Like if this was available to me, then I would have done it. I would pay it.
The truth is that 3 years would have cost you so much more than, I don't know what you charge, $4,000 or whatever the course is.
Yeah.
It's like that
way
is
less.
so,
Yeah. It's like $2,000,
like,
but
all
yeah.
right, we'll put it up then.
Yeah.
No, because like the cost of the pottery studio, it's like, I don't know, maybe I've spent $250,000 in that whole 4 years, but it's like I've probably wasted $250,000 as well.
Yeah,
so
God,
probably it's like half of
knowing you and what you put in your marketing budgets.
Yeah, so it's like that. If I was to then teach someone, which I'm probably never going to do because not that excited about someone else starting a pottery studio, but it's like that's $500,000 of knowledge.
Yeah, totally. You knowing what you have created with the pottery studio. If I wanted to start a pottery studio, if I lived in Adelaide and I saw Rod has a pottery studio and you were offering like 6-month mentorship of how to start a pottery studio and do it successfully, fucking oath I'd buy it. I would just be like, that is the best investment I can make to get my business up and running. Same thing for podcasting. It's like you can totally do it on your own, or you could pay and like get it, like have success with it within the first 6 months, 6 weeks or whatever it is, whatever your goal is. It's just like, it just makes sense.
And just the ability to, like, you've got your one-on-one. Obviously, we're friends, so I can keep messaging you outside.
Yeah, obviously you violate my boundaries. Yeah.
But the fact, if you have, like, we have our one-on-one and it's like half an hour is talking about other stuff. But if you just, like, had that 1 hour a week with your mentor, you can hash through so much. Like, I was thinking about, people always ask me stuff about property, and I think, previously to this question, I'm like, I don't think of myself as like a guru in property. But then I thought about the other day, I'm like, I've been doing this for 10 years and my dad was doing it for 30 years. So I've like got 40 years of knowledge because I learned everything from him and then I learned my own stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like I probably could start a
100%. Like, and your interests lie there. We'll be driving around way back when and you'll be like, oh, just pull into this residential street. Look at these houses. Sick, Rod. Like, no, but it was cool because you loved it, right? Which means like, and it's similar to what you talk about with the podcasting thing. Like, you're not going to start this. The reason why my mentorships or one-on-one clients or coaching contains whatever it is I'm offering is good is because I'm obsessed with it. And similar for you. That's when you know that would be something that you could think about doing. Next minute, Rod starts property coaching.
Yeah, property maybe. But that's the thing, like the pottery one, I said I would never do it because I actually probably wouldn't. But the business side probably would interest me. So then I guess I probably would be interested in doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm in a debate at the moment of like, what is my passion like in terms of marketing and podcasting? They're very similar. What I love about podcasting is what I've learned from marketing. Yeah, am I obsessed with marketing or am I not? And so, because I've got these like, clients that are marketing clients only, no podcasting involved. And I was thinking, I'm like, is this true still for me? And I'm actually in reflection about it at the moment. Don't have the answer, but it's important, I think, to reflect on, is this truly what I want to be doing? And is my heart fully in it? Because you've got to honor that for your clients.
100%.
Yeah.
And now I'm reflecting on the pottery studio.
Oh, gosh.
Only because what you said before is I remember, it's funny because you said I would, it's like everything was about pottery studio 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was because it was in that really building stage.
Yeah. Because you liked business and marketing and because you had me in there with you probably.
Yeah. Whereas now it's like,
problems.
Well, we're transitioning, but my attention is just so on the other things that, even the podcasting starting to interest me more, but everything else that it's like, fully switched again. So you've got to keep reevaluating.
You do.
You can't just go, I used to like this, I still do.
Yeah. And I think that's honestly like the beauty of business is that you can, go all in with the thing that you're passionate about, build it up so it's fucking epic, build the team in order to have that taken care of if you do need to step into the other like arena for a bit. Like for me, it's like marketing is so, true to me. I've got contractors now that if I was to need to not be like spearheading it, sweet, like you can talk to Georgia, like we've got your strategy in place, like she's passionate, like that's actually the smarter business thing for you to do. And like, for you've never had like the pottery studio has never been your be all and end all. So it's not going to be like they're relying on you. Like if you were to focus on builds in Bundaberg, like cool, that doesn't affect them because you've built the team.
Which we have a really good team at the moment with passion in there.
Totally. And you can feel that on literal socials. Like I can see that. It's just like you can't fake that.
Let's talk about how your mindset developed around business and how that relates to the rest of your life. Like,
right.
You mentioned that the wasn't people pleasing. What was it? To prove yourself.
Yeah.
So dealing with traumas.
Yeah.
Throughout the business, was that through business you realized that, or was that another practice of yours?
Business is the ultimate self-development journey, in my opinion. It's an opportunity to stare at your inadequacies and grow. I believe that to be true about podcasting, and I believe that to be true about relationships and everything. So I feel like, yes, it has been a massive moment and tool for reflection for me to become better in literally everywhere in my life, and vice versa. Like the way I show up in my relationships now inform how I show up in business. So I think that to put it down to, I'm sure you want to know like an example of like where that led to what and all the things.
Well, my mind's going to like when you get a team, you start dealing with multiple relationships.
Right.
So you start,
So interesting. The team thing for me, I would say that people would not, I am a very unique leader, I would say. From the leaders that I've been around in my like corporate life, in, jobs through school, in working with you, like there is no leader that I've been exposed to that is anything like I am. So I don't know whether what I'm doing is correct, but I do like what I'm doing and the way that I am a mentor to my people first before my work. And I've been tested in that element because there becomes a time where I've had to assess where I'm like, is this people-pleasing trauma where I want to be liked by my staff? Or is this because I genuinely want them to succeed in their endeavours?
I see the other. I see the
endeavours.
Yeah.
And that's what it is now. But I think there's duality in everything. And I think at one stage it could have been like that at play for sure, because I do want to be liked. Like, and that's something would love to say I don't. Like, I would love to sit here and be like, I don't care if I'm liked or not, because I believe that is awesome. Like, I'd love to be that, but I still do care if I'm liked, and that's why I'm a great marketer.
Can we talk about that? Because I think that's a very interesting thing, because a lot of people, I would like to say that as well. The other day, it was like probably 3 days ago, someone they're kind of taken something that's not even to do with them, and they're projecting it all on me, but they really don't like me. It's not even about me.
Right. But like, they believe it is.
They believe it is. But the fact that I'm now picking up that they're annoyed at me and the initial feeling, I actually laughed and I was like, that's interesting. Why am I laughing at this? But it was like a change of that, that initial, I don't know, it's like you go on maybe a defense or something.
Yeah.
How would you explain if you find out that someone doesn't like you that you thought did, and what's happening inside for you?
Okay. I have my latest integration or realization is that I have an issue or have previously had an issue with being misunderstood. So immediately for me, if someone doesn't like me, I'm like, okay, well, what did they misunderstand?
What did they do wrong?
No. Yeah, well, yeah, essentially. And that is like blaming, immediately, like not taking accountability for myself, because it's like I believe that I know that I have everyone's usually best interests at heart when I'm around them. And we've dealt with this with mutual friends before, where like someone has taken something I've said and like gone to you about it, and I'm like, what I was like. I was genuinely shocked and afraid and shooken up by that, because that was not my intention. Since that, like fast forward a few years, now if I find out that someone doesn't like me, I just think, good, like cool. Like I genuinely believe that is a reflection for them to take part in what is triggering that response for them to not like me. Because, being someone who goes after what I want, I do trigger a lot of people. because they would love to continue to believe that it's too hard to do that, isn't it? Like, so me, that's a thing that I've had to deal with, taking up space, being, I guess, somewhat confident in myself. It's like, people, like the whole, like, Sophie's loud, something I grew up with. It's like, I'm not loud. I'm just not quiet and sitting in the corner like you. And you're allowed to not like me for that. And I am allowed, but I shouldn't be offended by that, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why I laughed, because I was like, I laughed because it's like, my intention was not any of this. My intention was not, there was no malicious intent for you to not like me. So then it goes back to, it's like this piece of like, I'll let them get through it sort of thing.
I had a conversation right before this podcast with a friend, and we were talking about a breakup, and she was saying how, like, he's just turned on me basically, and like, he's angry at me for this, it was amicable, now it's not. And I said to her, I was like, for him to get through this, to heal through this breakup, he needs to villainize you. You need to you need to honor his experience. It's none of your business. But like, this could be a crucial step in his healing process and getting over this relationship. You're the villain in his mind. You're not a villain in my mind. You're not a villain in your mind. Like, what matters to you?
Yeah. It's the best way to look at it when you start to realize that the version that you see of me versus the version Kristen sees of me versus Tanya, it's like if we were all four in the room versus the version that I see of myself, and then the version that I believe you see of me versus all of them, there's like 6 versions of me in one room.
100%.
So then if I cared so much about what you thought, well, she thinks different, and they're not even the same version.
100%. I mean, we are the perfect examples of that. We have seen each other in so many different lights over the years.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Even reflecting on all these things, it's funny, like the memories coming back, because they're just like...
Yeah.
It feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it does. It's very interesting.
So what is your meditation practice, morning routine? What does that look like now? And how do you believe, when you are out of sync with it, how does that impact the rest of your business?
So my morning routine at the moment is I go to bed without digital impact. So like, I turn off my phone, whatever. I always like meditate or listen to a guided meditation before bed. Yeah, so it sort of starts there. Then I'll wake up, not touch my phone, this is something that I've actually recently taken really seriously, and I would say would be probably the part of my morning routine that I advocate for the most. Like, everything else I'm like, do whatever. But, it's just whatever works for you. But the whole like not actually checking my phone is huge, because I'm always posting like stuff for On Track. I'm always, invested in people's like social media. Like, I care about what's going on social media, because it's what I'm doing. It's my clients are working on stuff, and it's like, it's a very usually positive infused energy, but it's a lot. Like, so if I check my phone immediately and I'm seeing like someone sharing something with me, or like, it's actually quite hectic, my phone. Like, a lot of people, if it's not on Do Not Disturb when I'm with them, are like, what is going on? Like, your phone's going off chops. So not checking it immediately is really crucial for me at the moment, because it just means like I can enter my day calm, and calm is not a normal state of being for me previously, but now I've realized that the most magnetic version, highest power version of myself, I think about her, I visualize her, and she is calm. And I'm like, okay, well, how can I embody that? And so that's why this has been a crucial step for me. So usually I would get up, not check my phone, have my, whatever I'm like supplements I'm doing at the time. At the moment, I'm doing the corrective culture cleanse. So there's oregano oil up in my mouth very early. But it might be celery juice, whatever. Or usually like sculling water. Then I'm out the door within like 15 minutes, always at the beach, either swimming, walking, going to Pilates. Like I'm like, I find it really like perfect to be out the door as soon as possible. And then I will at some stage come back home and meditate. And when I'm really feeling good, which like the last probably 4 weeks I have been, I'm journaling in the morning too, which I think is helpful. I don't think it's crucial, but I think it's very, helpful to me to clear my brain for the day. So I like to do that, but I don't always. So yeah, and then I'll meditate. Did I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually meditate. I like to meditate after I've been outside because I feel like I'm losing the day if I'm meditating, like if the sunrise is happening and I'm missing it.
Yeah. So you rush out the door to avoid not going?
No, I think I honestly have something deep within me that's the fear of missing out on the sunrise.
Okay.
Like truly, like I do not want to miss that.
Right.
But yeah, no, I will always leave. Like I've never missed my morning workout ever.
Because I get up early and I try to always just write something before I go to the gym. And the other morning, I think I wrote for like 30, 40 minutes. I don't know what I was writing about. Normally just keep writing. And afterwards, like I was still tired because I was laying on my bed writing. And it was, I think, 4 o'clock by then. But my mind felt like I just had a workout. So I was like awake, but I wasn't. I was like, this is really interesting because I'd literally obviously just done a workout writing for half an hour and then went to the gym and worked out my body. But journaling is powerful. Yeah,
I find it to be powerful too. And it's just it's just a great reflection tool. Like I remember when people would talk about journaling back in the day and I'd be like, cool. I'd get in front of my notebook and be like, dear diary, like, what am I writing? This is so weird, like, and whatever. And I just make it weird. And I'm like, okay, but what if, like, make this make sense for you, Sophie? Like, no one's reading it. Just write anything. And I just think the moment you, like, let go and just, like, whatever you need to tell yourself, like, for me, it really helped to be like, no one is going to read this. And I don't know why that, like, helped me get through, right? But I'm like, okay, cool. What's my deepest secret right now? Like, that's something I've journaled on. What do I not want anyone to know right now?
That's
powerful.
That is good. And I think, I always just write the first word that's on my mind.
Right.
Because then it just like you start writing and then by the time you've done that, by the end of it, you're writing something completely different and you're 100%. Writing what you're just word vomiting on a page.
Exactly.
And there's things in there that you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was in my mind.
With my journey of like coming more into my feminine, I have written things like just starting on the top of the page, writing the word receive and writing. Oh, I'm not talking about that anymore. Link it back. We'll receive. Blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting because I think your ego is playing a role. It's still active being like, it doesn't want to receive, right? Like it doesn't, like for me, that was my thing, but it might be different for you, for whatever you're journaling on. But I'm like, why am I bypassing this topic? Go back to receive. And you get through, and I've done this exercise, and when you're just writing consistently for 11 minutes, your ego has actually switched off. You're working with your subconscious by around 8 minutes or something. So it's actually a really interesting like tool to use in order to words that are relevant to you, that like maybe you want to step out of lack mindset, like journaling on the word abundance. Like what's that mean to you? And how many times do you veer away from it? Keep it back.
Do you think people are scared to read what's going on in their mind? It's similar to meditating. When you actually sit still, everything starts coming up and you're like, oh crap, I've got a lot of things to deal with. It's
interesting. That's an interesting question because I don't know whether I don't believe people are scared because I'm not. But I believe, like now that you mention it, I'm like, when I talk to friends and stuff, and obviously they know I meditate, and it's like, why don't you? Like again, like sorry, like just circling back, why are we avoiding meditation? Like it's powerful, and it's kind of like, are you guys scared? Like I don't know, friends, if you're listening, like let me know. And I think it's more so like I think people like to live. Like this is all unconscious behavior, right? But I think that people like to live in denial and like be ignorant to what they're facing. So it's not like a conscious, I'm too scared to meditate, my thoughts are wild, which some people say. But I think it's more like they are, in fact, unconscious, like putting up walls to be like, I'm not meditating. Like, and this is actually something that I've realized a friend said to me. It's just like, your ego is really smart. It's not saying, hey, don't meditate, like, you're too tired. It's actually saying, hey, you don't need to meditate. You're actually, you went for a swim this afternoon, which was very, like you were very mindful throughout that swim. You don't need to meditate.
Yeah.
It's like telling these truths that you're like.
Half truths.
And like, or you don't need to meditate. You went to yin like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
How many of your friends went to yin? None. You don't need to meditate. It's like, it's those things, those thoughts that are protecting you from going within that people don't even know that they're scared. But yeah, I think maybe they are.
So I was going to ask something else about, I'll just quickly say it, like the most common thing that, like you've done Vipassana meditation, but the most common thing when I tell people about it, that, I could never sit with myself for 10 days. So I think there is a degree of fear. But just on the ego thing, it is interesting because the ego is always trying to protect the death of itself. And when you meditate, you're constantly just killing programs. Like they're coming up, then you observe them, they piss off. Yeah. Because the ego is just constantly perpetuating the cycle of all that trauma.
Exactly. And I think people hear, like people listening, they hear this. They're like, yeah, I get what the ego's doing. Haha, ego talking, rah, rah. But I'm like, okay, but do you actually acknowledge that when the ego sounds a lot like your higher self and that's still being your ego? So, you know, it's like...
Explain that.
So for me, right, my ego, this is my ego, would be speaking... You have worked so hard this year on Track Studio. You've built this incredible studio for people. The studio of your dreams has been built. You don't need to like always be going and moving forward. Like that is my ego trying to make me feel better about the fact that I've just had a lazy Monday or whatever it looks like. It's like your ego is protecting you, and it's necessary for a human experience. Like. And there's duality in these things. That is true. But also, do I want a life where I reach this point in my business and that's it? Or if I was honest with my higher self, do I want an extraordinary life? Is this level 1 and I'm heading to level 100? You know what I mean? Like your ego's not always being like this like big obvious thing. Like you need to be, that awareness piece is super important because it's like, hear what you're saying. Yes, that's true. But where here is my ego still playing out, even though that's true?
And I think when you stop, it's all like Mondays off is fine, like relax, whatever 100%. You did. But the complacency, and then if it becomes Tuesday and then it becomes Wednesday, and then you start saying, well, I've achieved so much in my life, so I don't need to.
Yeah.
I think the moment you stop is the moment you start dying.
Yeah, agreed.
Because you would just, there's forward and back. There's no neutral.
Yeah.
The moment you're not going forward, you're actually reversing because everything else is surpassing you.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And it's an interesting mindset that I'm building around that very thing, coming from 3 years ago when I was very much in my masculine. And now being very much more in my feminine. What does that look like? What does actually taking that next step look like when it's not an actual, masculine next step?
Yeah. That is interesting because the business is quite a masculine. Well, it is. It's the physical, and it's like go, and it's discipline, it's order, and whereas the feminine, obviously, you've probably got an interesting juggle now.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Do I pass on like bring in a CEO or something that can direct the ship for me, or like what does it look like? It would be interesting. Explain it. Let's go. What's
speaking of interesting?
It's funny because about like 20 minutes ago, I'm like, I'm going to bring up the masculine, feminine, then you brought up again. So now it's time for the question. Let's talk about you stepping into your feminine, because we do talk about this a lot on this podcast, and I think it's a very important thing to understand.
It is a very important thing to understand, and I don't think that I'm by any means the feminine guru. Like I'm very much still on my path to figuring this whole thing out.
L plates or P plates, would you say?
I would say red P plates. So
good. See, this is the perfect time because someone is just about to get on their L's.
Yeah. Good luck out there.
Taking through the L's.
Remember to indicate. So, yeah, I would say what it looks like for me is I really have always grown up really relating to men in terms of like, obviously now, it's probably obvious I'm kind of got entrepreneurial like tendencies. And therefore there's an element of me that is so true. That is like, it's so true for me to like want to get up and go and like create and build and everything. And so I need to honor that part. And this is the thing that I think I went to the other way, like shaming myself for all my masculine tendencies and like taking charge. Now, like since being on my P plates, I recognize that like, there are so many ways in order to like step into my feminine when necessary. For example, let's talk about meditation. Obviously, we've all heard that I meditate, but also what I've brought in is, I think, and it's really important as a woman, like to get back into your body. Like, so like dancing and like really dancing around and like really embodying like your movement and like being in your body is probably a more important thing in my routine than meditation right now. Because meditation particularly, and I've studied a couple of different ones, and it's actually always challenging. I'm like, which meditation should I go through? Like, I've done Vipassana, which is a very masculine in my opinion.
I was about to say, Vipassana is actually quite masculine.
It's hugely masculine, and it makes sense that in that phase of my life that I went to Vipassana, because I'm like, prove energy. I can do it. Fucking watch me. Like, there, I did it. Cool. Like, and that's awesome, and that's a part of my journey. And again, there's a part of my personality that thrives in that, and that's why I did it, and that's meant to happen. But since studying Vedic meditation, which is the complete opposite, it's like effortless meditation. It's like, you know, relaxed and everything. That was transformative for me, because I'm like, okay, well, I actually don't need to focus on the sensations. It's actually about it's just about being. It's about actually acknowledging thoughts, all the things. And similar can be said for, you know, right now when my focus is to, like, I've got this business I'm building, which I'm honoring and doing. Like, when I'm here, I'm here. But when I'm at home, or when I'm like with my friends, or with like someone who I'm romantically interested in, I'm absolutely not in my masculine at all. And I will actually actively take off my, like, pull down my walls. And that sounds like woo-woo, I think, but it's a process for me. Like, I've grown up with walls up. So like, they've all been there. So it's actually, it's kind of like Brene Brown talks about taking off your armor. Like, I've actually had to do that. And what that looks like to me is a lot of like, coming into my body, doing like, dancing and self-pleasure, and, you know, just like, just being and like accepting exactly where I am.
Well said. I think I just had a thought before when we were talking about Vipassana being masculine, and I don't know how, is it Veda?
Vedic, yeah.
Vedic. I don't know how Vedic meditation would correspond, but I think Vipassana, the practice itself, is very masculine, but the byproduct, once you get out of the hall, I'm talking about at Vipassana, you're like completely present and you're completely feminine.
Interesting. And this is the thing. So this is actually the thing that why I'm on my P plates, is because it's like what I'm focusing on to get, and this is for people who want to integrate into their feminine, is how, like, stillness, experiencing stillness, whether you're masculine, feminine, whatever, is going to benefit you. Like, you're listening to this, I'm sure you agree. How you get there, I think, is the difference between where your attention should lie. So for me, after dancing and whatever, doing these things, and then meditating after, is like, okay, she's actually in stillness and she's fully in her feminine. And whereas like we talk about this whole like journey on like embracing the journey, the process, trust the process. The process is the only thing we have control over as people in our human experience. The outcome would be feeling still and experiencing that. So when you were trying to integrate into your feminine, how are you doing that? That's what you've got control over. So do it in a more feminine way. So if you're trying to like get into your masculine as a man, doing Vipassana, going through that process, hugely beneficial, because not only
discipline.
Exactly, it's discipline, it's showing up, it's all the things, it's fucking hard, it's like the slog, you know. And then the destination is stillness, and similar to dancing.
That's it, yeah. It is, because you're 4 a.m. up and you're pretty much meditating till 9 p.m. and you can't use your phone, you can't talk to anyone, you're following a massive system.
The timetable.
Timetable. You eat at this time, you can't eat after 12.
Exactly.
Like, yada, yada, yada. And you're sitting in the bloody, what are the ones called, where you can't move? The strong determination.
Yeah,
it's like you can't you can't even move your body. Well, you can, but they recommend you don't.
Yeah.
And you feel like that discipline, when you can surpass the discipline, you're like 40 minutes in, your legs are dead.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not fucking moving.
100%.
And then you bring that into business and it's like, you can just go like all day if you want.
And that's why Vipassana was so good for me, right? Like there is so much that like I've learned from that experience that I can bring into business now, because like when things get hard in business, it's only me. Like I don't have a business partner. So I actually need that discipline. It's serving me, but also I don't need it every hour of the day. And like being able to come out of it is very important for me at this point in my life.
I've always looked at David Goggins as very Vipassana sort of practice. You know, he's, say runs 200 kilometers in whatever time, but it's like the mind is actually in a Vipassana state where it's like, okay, my shins are fucking shin splints. I've got shin splints and my feet are bleeding and I'm dehydrated, but I'm just going to observe that and keep going anyway. I'm not reacting to the pain. And that is literally Vipassana. Obviously it's not that extreme, but I wonder whether Goggins' mind has gone through the same process.
Yeah, totally.
Which is, I guess, the same for anyone in like military and everything like that.
Totally.
You're pushed to the limit of just your mind cannot react to sensation.
Yeah. And here's the thing. In meditation, super powerful experience. When you're running a marathon, super powerful experience. When you were trying to like have a relationship with someone.
And you,
and you're just like, nah, bang. I'm like, well, doesn't really serve you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's so good on some ways though, and like when you're trying to get over a relationship.
Totally. But also,
are you not feeling it?
Yeah, like that's the thing. I think for me, like a lot of my coping mechanisms in life has been more of that,
But if you're truly doing Vipassana, then you would be just
noticing
it, observing it, not reacting to it.
And not adding thoughts.
Not adding thoughts to it, which is definitely, I've found it like phenomenal for getting over things. That's why I don't look back, because it's just like I'll feel it in the moment, feel it. Okay, it's gone. See ya.
Totally. Yeah, I would say that you have gotten to a point like where you do that well, but I think that the teaching of it, there's flaws in the teaching of it, because people who haven't, say, actually gone to Vipassana and are listening to Goggins being like, go, 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 go. And it's like they're just bypassing a crucial step in healing.
I think there's so many ways to get there. Like I was listening to someone the other day talk about how this guy's been doing Vipassana for 10 years, twice a day, following, everything he meant to, going one sit every year for 10 days. And then he only healed through talk therapy. So I think it's like...
Interesting. I've got things to say about talk therapy. I don't believe in it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad, it obviously works for people.
Well, it was talk therapy to bring up the issue, the trauma, to then go in and observe it, which is more or less Vipassana anyway.
Totally.
But they used the questions to actually bring the feeling and the emotion up inside the person, to then go inside, feel the sensation and cry and just be with it, and do not add labels to it. Don't say this is good or bad, just this is what it is.
Totally. Which
is more or less Vipassana.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So why don't you like talk therapy?
Okay, so I'll rephrase and say that I think talk therapy has its place. I think everything has its place. I don't agree with it for me. So I've tried it and it didn't work. I think that the important thing, there's a whole process that I believe is necessary to healing, and I think that talk therapy can actually be placed in these sections. So I believe when you have an issue or a trauma or a problem or whatever it might be, there's a level that you need to be aware of it. Then comes the part where you need to accept it, and then comes the part where you can actually transcend it. And I think that talk therapy can be helpful at that awareness phase and often the acceptance phase too. But the work and the action that actually helps your future you is the transcendence part. It's the dissolution of that story. Dissolution? Well, it's the dissolution of that story or that pattern that actually helps you. So, and I've never seen...
I would agree entirely. And I wanted to, because when we had that conversation a few weeks ago, which you are more than welcome to share it or not, but the actual conversation may have brought that awareness up. I know it has when I've spoken to other people, and it's like, wow, I'm actually being like the person that I am holding resentment towards. This is another example. But then, yeah, you're right. From there, you then need to accept that that's actually where you're at.
Yeah.
And then feel what's actually coming up and why is it triggering you so much.
Yeah.
And then you can transcend that feeling, because then next time that experience comes up, you're okay with that feeling.
Yeah.
Because it's just a feeling.
Yeah, totally.
So I don't know whether you want to talk about that experience.
Which experience are you referring to? Because we've had a few conversations. Are you talking?
I sent you a message. I had an awareness after our chat.
Okay, yeah.
And then I sent you a message and you said you burst out crying.
Yeah. I don't even know how to describe this, to be honest. But so if we want to talk about, like when you said we were having this podcast, you're like, we're talking about trauma. And I'm like, God, like what trauma are we going to be talking about? Like, you know, I don't know. Like I just feel like in my life I've had a few events that have been traumatic, and there's levels of healing of these things, right? So this time we were talking about, a learned behavior that I had, I was saying, I'm like, I am struggling to receive, I'm struggling to feel supported, and it's not by the fact that I'm not supported as such as I know at this point in my life that like there's a block, I'm not receiving. And so I was talking to you about it, and we did like a healing and whatever. And then you sent me a message saying, I've just had an awareness that you actually observed that from your mum. And I was like, wow. And the emotional release of that, just like naming it, it was an awareness, an immediate acceptance, because I was like, yes, that's what it is. So
this is the point that, and I just got goosebumps, this is the point that I want to talk about, because I know a lot of people, you were at a point to not just have the awareness, but to accept it, because most people would feel what came up and resist the tears or whatever happened, and they would shut that down. So how would you recommend someone learns to get through that?
There's so much groundwork that needs to be done in order to be at a point where you can hear something like that and accept it immediately. Like for me, it was about, I've been actively trying, or not trying, but like kind of surrendering to, if I want these answers, I need to open my heart. Like I need to open my heart to them to come through, and like in whatever way, shape and form they're going to come through. We weren't talking for a very long time, and then you offered me a healing. I was just trust. Like I'm going into this. It doesn't feel wrong. So obviously, you know, it's right. And then, but like, it's not as though it's in my past been supernatural to me to be like trusting of people and like letting them in and being vulnerable. So I was like, okay, if I was healed, and I felt good, I would lean in and trust. I would be vulnerable. I would let this person in.
Did you say it was uncommon for you to be vulnerable?
Yes.
So you decided I'm going to do the other opposite?
Yes, but that's been an active thing. This is why I talk about groundwork. It's been an active thing for months before this happened, where I'm like, okay, because the thing about vulnerability is like, you know, I'll be seeing people, guys and stuff, and they'll feel a block. I'm guarded. And they'll say, I really want you to be vulnerable. But it's like, well, you've not created a safe container for me to feel vulnerable. Because vulnerability can't be forced. It's not true vulnerability. So like, I've been aware of the role that everyone plays in that, but also had to be super accountability for like, where is it serving me to be someone who can't be vulnerable? And I think that question to ask, if there's something you're trying to work through, and I'm kind of bypassing the question, but I'll come back to what we were talking about. But if there is something that you don't like about the way you're living, say you feel like you're too closed off, you're not vulnerable, say you don't like have enough time to go to the gym, it's frustrating, you can't reach your goals, like whatever your thing that's frustrating you is, the only reason it exists in your life is because your ego is gaining, you were gaining from it. So like what also gets to be true while I don't feel safe to be vulnerable with these men or friendships or whatever it is, let's keep it in the men department for the moment. Like I also get a narrative that gets to play out is the fact that, well, I don't have to now, you know, I don't have to open up. Like I also don't have to like feel things that maybe I don't want to feel. Like that also gets to be true. And it's like, what do I gain from that? Well, I get to be perceived as a super put together woman who doesn't get fazed by things like that would be labeled as like a psycho girl reaction. Like I don't buy into that, because I'm never putting myself in a position where I'm actually being vulnerable. So therefore my emotions don't get to play out and I win. I get to be the cool girl. Okay. Well, that's what's happening here. while it's true that the men aren't creating that safe container for me to be vulnerable, there's also this part of like accountability I need to take of like everything I'm gaining from that being true. So it's going to keep happening. You're going to keep getting in a position where you are in relationships with men who don't make you feel safe to be vulnerable for as long as you're gaining from that situation happening, which is what's happening. So to bring it back to the question, the groundwork that was put in prior to us like communicating and again and having this healing was like, okay, I dissolved the story where I can't feel safe in the presence of men, partners, relationships, and it's now fanned out to more, but the work really was there. And so now that is no longer in my vibration, in my fucking sphere of reality, I can go into a situation with a man and feel safe to be vulnerable, which gave you the opportunity to get some sort of access to what I'm dealing with. So the reason why I was able to accept what you said is because I knew that I was being true and open. And this is all unconscious. Like, I'm not sitting there being like, I'm going to open myself up so Rod can give me this, like, blah, blah, blah. But the reason I was able to immediately read that message from you, have that awareness and accept it, is because I know I was being honest when I was in the room with you. There was no part of me that could put it off to being like, yeah, righto, tell yourself that big hero like you reckon you know, because I actually let you in.
Which is interesting because I had resistance obviously from past knowing Sophie to like, do I send this? Because it's kind of, we hadn't been speaking for ages and I'm like a bit hesitant to say anything because I'm like, I don't want to say anything that's going to, whatever, tarnish whatever's just happened again. But then I ask myself and I feel into what feels right. Do you do that?
Not so much. I feel like I don't do the active decision. I just feel like, and this is probably more so being more integrated in my feminine, is that I just am and I just trust and I just be and I just do as according to that. Whereas previously I would have been like, how would this be received? How would this blah, blah, blah. And like, for me, like, so I completely understand why you would have had that thought given our like relationship and everything and how I might have reacted in the past is like, you don't even know. And it's like, I've been there, the one who asked, but now I'm like, well, meanwhile, like you're doing that. And then I'm like, well, old Sophie also wouldn't have admitted that I just burst into tears crying after reading that message.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, just doing and just being, and I'm not thinking about how the people are going to perceive it.
It is very much how I live my life, is the flow of whatever download comes first or whatever is brought into my vortex or awareness, whatever you want to call it, first. And I trust that.
Totally.
Because I'm sure I say this on every podcast, but the moment you start questioning that, there is an infinite list of possibilities that you could now choose, and you're just going to create chaos from all of them. So if you just become confident that your decision is going to be correct in that first one, then I feel like the next one comes, and then it says synchronicities. It's kind of like that whole experience was a weird synchronicity. It's like, why did that even happen? It was so strange. Like,
yeah, I think you should give people context because they'll be like, what?
Well, we hadn't spoken for like 6 months, and I don't even know. Did I message you? I feel like I saw your story about the podcast mentorship, and I was just like,
so random.
I'm going to sign up, and you just didn't believe me. And then the next day I came over and I was like, I just did this quantum energy healing thing with course with John, and I'd like to practice if you're open to it. And you said yes, and
it's so interesting because like
you could have so had resistance. I could have gone, why the hell would I talk to Sophie?
Yeah, we haven't been talking because we had a falling out. And this is, I think we are two people who are actually practicing what we preach in the sense of dissolving stories, acknowledging our own accountability in the part, and then like actually moving forward. Like, I think the crucial part to be able to get from where we were to where we now are, or where we where we're headed, is like for me, it was like taking responsibility for my part in the journey. And I don't know whether you've actively taken responsibility, but energetically you have. And like I've received that energetically. I'm like, okay, well, you did say sorry to me, which you've never ever done in the history of Herodotos.
So
You've never said sorry.
I actually have an interesting thing around sorries in I don't know if I want to get into that, but the part about I'm really good at dissolving the story and just like it just doesn't exist anymore because it really doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's like the version that we were then. It's like, well, that's not now, so why would I even think about it? I was spending a moment wasting my time thinking about what it was.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people snapshot, that's Sophie, and that's still Sophie a year later.
Yeah.
And she hasn't changed. And I mean, that's probably because a lot of people don't change.
Yeah.
So they can't see how you possibly would have changed so much.
Totally.
But I guess we're just every day it's a new
person potentially.
Well, yeah. Moment to moment.
Yeah.
The idea around sorry, I don't know if we might edit this bit out, but I'll see how I go.
Yeah.
The notion of apologising if you didn't have the wrong intent. It's like, well, what are you apologising for? Because are you apologising for how you made them feel when you didn't intend to make them feel that bad?
Mm.
So then are you really sorry about something you didn't do?
Interesting. And this is the Rod I knew back in the day. And that's why when you did apologise to me, I was like, this is huge because I know that you don't do it. So basically you just apologised for the fact that you posting about starting a podcast studio and how that impacted me.
Right.
You're like, I don't know how to respond to that, like, because I told you how it made me feel and whatever after months of not talking. And you were like, I don't know what I meant to say to that, but I am sorry that happened. And I think for me that exactly what you said, a whole like, should you say sorry when you believe there was no intent? It's just like, well, for me, the reason why I stopped talking to you wasn't because you did that. It was because I felt you gaslit me immediately. Like, why are you being crazy, Sophie, about being offended by that? It's like, well, obviously there's like a conflict or like, you know.
Even though it's not I get it.
Yeah.
I remember. We definitely hashed it out because it wasn't my podcast studio, but it is and whatever.
Yeah, and you're still here at mine.
Still here,
so
because lights, camera, action.
All good. But yeah, I think it's interesting. And it's like, you know, I've had falling outs with people who have decided, you know, there's no coming back from that. And I'm like, cool, you've decided, then there is no coming back from that. You know what I mean? That's so true. And like, that's cool. Then they miss out on like having me in their life or vice versa. I miss out on having them in my life. But the reality is like, I don't want someone to be like handbraking, like fucking handbraking when we're trying to go down the highway, which I believe is what that is, holding on to the past within reason. Like, you got to honor yourself in the moment and like cut people off if that serves you, like we did. But then, yeah, like let go.
Yeah, and
set yourself
if
free.
your paths do kind of split and go around an island and then meet again, it's like you don't need to bring the baggage back with you.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot.
We have.
So probably wrap it up.
We're wrapping it up, boys.
I think
wrap it up.
You know, just rehashing. I think I want to finish with asking where you see On Track going, but the rehashing of, I think the meditation and the self-awareness and the business journey is all intertwined because, like, I agree with you, the journey of entrepreneurship is very self-reflective and growth. This is always you're either growing or you're dying. And I feel like everything we spoke about is very integrated.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah.
So where do you see On Track? Just because, just context again, before we started this podcast, a friend of ours came into the studio and Sophie had this awareness that everything that she had told her in January, Tanya, she's like, oh, I did this. Oh, and also did this. Oh, wow, I did everything that I said I was going to do. So let's just put it live now. So then in 5-10 years, we can look back and go, oh, you did all those things.
It's hard for me to say exactly where I see On Track going, but what I know to be true is that it will be the destination to record your podcast. Mm-hmm. The brand will be bigger than me. And my role in my life is actually going to be, like, you know, the truth is, and this is like huge, but the truth is, like, I foresee myself as more so like not a motivational speaker, but a speaker for, going to people and like inspiring them. Like, that's my role. And I feel like, you know, On Track Studio is just building me credibility for my story.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to build, and then I'm going to like influence people based off how it goes. And the exciting thing about the studio is the fact that podcasting is so powerful, and it makes sense for people to start a podcast, up-level a podcast. Like, this is, like, it's so ear to the ground of what people need, and they don't even, like, most people don't even know that they need this, like, service, right? So it's just about, like, it's going to become massive. So what it looks like, I don't even know, but it's going to be, something to do with, like, a destination to record, and then a brand even bigger than me.
Beautiful. After finishing this podcast with Sophie, I honestly believe that this podcast, Stillness Everyday, I'm talking about how to integrate and how important stillness is across all parts of your life, and why, money, relationships, your own mental state, they all intertwine, because you don't want to just be still on the yoga mat. You want to be able to be at peace with your entire life. And I think that this podcast with Sophie that we just did really shows someone who is embodying that in her life. So
wow,
thanks for coming on. That was a great podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Peace out, everyone.